So starting with my presentation, the content of my presentation will be talking about the introduction, the different types of writing and research, types of research papers, the structural research paper in detail, the referencing softwares mentally, the journal selections, and what we will look for when we publish a paper and we're going for that. Coming to the introduction, where what we talk about the research and its statistics. So as per Thayer in 2001, the research can be broken down into two words, research RE and search, where RE means again and again we're doing something, and search is you examine something closely and you trust and you prove something. So this noun word we can describe as which is something which is careful, which is systematic, a patient study, investigation, and establishes facts or principles. So if you define research in one line, then it would be a systematic process of discovery and advancement of human knowledge as per Gritton and Jones in 2009, where it has the characteristics of a systematic process, an in-depth analysis and critical analysis with no errors. And it is also given as an observation and direct experience by the researcher or the author who is doing the research on it. It is objective, unbiased, and logical. So these were the basic introduction so that we can move ahead and understand how to write a paper. Coming to different types of writings in research, we have first as a research proposal. When you start a research, you give a proposal. If you're doing a PhD, the first thing we are trying to do is a research proposal. So when you have to do this, you are basically have to prepare before a study begins. A researcher plans for a study, which is where you can identify, you have identified it. You define the focus, methods, and goals. You outline from start to finish. Then the next comes the review article, where it is others published work. It's not something which is original. You summarize the existing literature, you explain the current state, and it is mostly from 3,000 to 5,000 word limits. Whereas, which is also a secondary data mostly, you don't do a primary data and record here. Whereas in a research paper, it is a primary work, primary data you are doing here. So it's an original research, which is a unique investigation, collecting data, analysis, interpretation, and reveal the truth, which should be neutral. But it should not be the depository of quotations, rewriting of somebody's ill thoughts that you have studied, or a description of a textbook, defense of somebody's opinion or emotional persuasions. So it is not something aapne kahin padha hai and you are just reading and rewriting in a rephrasing it and making it somebody else's work. It should be your work. That is a research paper. Then the research report is something which you done after the completion of everything. You after study is completed. It is something which is real. It is a primary data which is explained to the methods and result. Coming to the types of the research papers, I quickly give you an idea what type of research papers are. The first type is analytical, then is argumentative, then which is cause and effect, then experimental, survey, problem solution, and report. Where analytical research paper is something in which you are posing a question, then you describe the question, then you identify the elements, and then you analyze it. It is mostly the secondary data, and then it becomes neutral. Where if you want to just it down into 3 parameters and 3 heads, it is about analysis or analyzing all the points, describing multiple points of view, then you draw a conclusion out of it. Whereas when you talk about the argumentative persuasive research paper, in this you talk about the side of the point of view, which is given supported by logical facts and statistical data. Whereas if you want to describe into 3 heads, it is about how you describe the problem from 2 points of view. You give the pros and cons of each side, and then you give the preference to one side. That is what to do in an argumentative paper. When it comes to cause and effect type of research paper, it is mostly written by the fresh students or the research scholars. You explain why you want to do it and what you want to do it, but it should not be mixed of causes and effects. So if you want to describe it into 3 heads, it is you describe the situation, you present the cause and effects, and you draw a conclusion here. The next type is experimental research paper, which is mostly done by the biological students, chemistry students, or physiology or sociology students, where it is supported by the data and analysis. So if you want to list it down into 3 heads, then you conduct experiment, share the useful experience, You provide the data and then sum up with that. Whereas we come to the survey research paper, it is mostly dealt by the sociology, physiology, marketing, public health, business, and advertising students, where you present somebody's opinion, you take a knowledge, you put the facts of social facts, and you do the behavior analysis here. So if you want to list it down in the three here, it is a conduct a survey, then you analyze the findings and you draw a conclusion out of it. Coming to the last two types of the types of papers, it is first is the problem solution, where you describe the problem, you propose a solution, and you defend it. Whereas in the report or research type of paper, you outline the work on a particular topic and you sum up the findings. So this was just to give you a brief glimpse how what are type of the research paper and research and its definitions. Coming to the main topic of the today's presentation, the structure of the research paper. It is written mostly under the heads of introduction. You write in the methodology. You explain the result, discussion, and conclusion and references. Coming to the first heading of the abstract, where it is talk about the content and the general topic. Under it, it can be a specific topic of your research also. You define here the questions. You also give the problem of your research design, what has been already known to you, what previous research has done or shown, and you give the reasons or goals of your research by explaining why it is important to address these questions. Are you, for example, examining a new topic, or why is it worth examining it, or like example, are you trying to fill some previous gaps in your previous research, or you're applying new methods to take a fresh look at existing ideas or data. Even you can also write a why here if you're trying to resolve any dispute within the literature of your field. Then you, in an abstract, in the end, you write the findings, results, or arguments by putting up the significance or implications of your findings or argument. One thing which I have realized with my experience of writing paper, that in the starting, we are very tempted to write abstract in the very beginning because it comes in the first of your research paper whenever you're writing something. But I believe in my personal experience that if you write abstract at the end, it helps you a lot because you have drafted a full paper and then you can summarize it very well when you are writing the abstract. So we can say that it is a gist or essence, which is from 150 to 250 words. It helps the person to decide whether he wants to read the paper or not. And you should make it remember that what is the goal of your paper and what the person wants to read and why he wants to read the paper. That should all be there in your abstract. So if you want to break the abstract into the three sections here, the first is a section, then the second is a paragraph and interparagraph. So for an abstract, if I divide them into interparagraph, it is divided into four heads. The first is what is the question is. Here we do what we do and how it matters. So I have given a three color codes here. The blue is for introduction section of your paper. Black is your result, and red is your discussion. So this is the three color codes which I'll be using for my whole structure of my research paper. So I'm taking one example of how abstract has been written on one of the paper. So this abstract is one of paper on reporting new findings about the reason for increasing economic homogamy among spouses. So we can see here it has been divided into four color codes. So let me read it out for you. So the first line says that the growing economic resemblance of spouses have contributed to rising inequality by increasing the number of couples in which there are too high or too low earning partners. So the statement is introduces you about the topic and implies the question which the study is trying to do and trying to create an interrelationship among them. The second, the green color is written as that the dominant explanation for this trend is increased assortative mating. The previous research has primarily relied on cross-sectional data and thus has been unable to disentangle changes in the assortative mating from changes in the division of the spouses in paid labor, a potential key mechanism given the drastic rise in wives' labor supply. We use the data from the panel study of income dynamics to decompose the increase in correlation between spouses' earnings and its contribution to inequality between 1970 and 2013 into parts due to the change in assortative mating and changes in the division of paid labor. So we have seen that the green color is mostly talking about the previous research and provide a rationale for a new search. Whereas the yellow color is talking about the data, research, and analytical methods used in this study. Whereas the last part is talking about the major findings and implication and significance of the study. And let's see how they have written about it. The contrary to what has often been assumed, the rise of economic homogamy and its contribution to inequality is largely attributable to changes in the division of the paid labor rather than changes in sorting on earning potential. Our findings indicate that the rise of economic homogamy cannot be explained by hypotheses centered on meeting and matching opportunities, and they show where in this process inequality is generated and where it is not. Coming to the next heading is a research paper of introduction, where it is where you set up your topic and approach to the reader. It has several goals, like you provide a background or summary for existing research, you give a position of your own approach, you detail out your research problem, you give an overview of your paper structure, you provide a history and summary of the subject. It's also important that to note that introduction looks different for an empirical paper and for an argumentative paper. So there are 5 steps under which you mostly write it down. So first is to introduce your paper, where you tell what your topic is and why it is interesting interesting or important to read about it. You should have a strong opening, the hook, which we say. It is a striking statement you can say, or which conveys the relevance of a topic. It can be an interesting fact or a statistical data or a strong statement, or it can also be just a question of your research. The second is your background, where you depend on what kind of approach of a paper you're taking. So if it is an argumentative paper, you then explain some general background here. And if it's an empirical paper, then it's you review some previous research and establish how that fits in. The third is your research problem, where in an argumentative paper, you simply state the problems you intend to discuss, whereas, or what is original or important, you can say. Whereas in empirical paper, you try to lead into the problem on the basis of your discussion of the literature review. So what I believe is that when you're establishing a research problem, you should think of this in questions like, what research gap is your work intend to fill? What limitation in previous work does it addresses? And what contribution to knowledge does it make? So there's one thing which I also felt and realized over the writing research paper, that we should always create a connection between your research problem and the existing research, so that it builds up what has been done and what you're supposed to do. So suppose you're writing a phrase like that, although X has been studied in detail and insufficient attendance has been paid to Y. So here what you're trying to do is that you're trying to address previously overlooked aspect of your topic. Or you can write a statement like, the implication of X study deserves to be explored further. And here you're trying to build something suggested by previous study and exploring it in greater depth. The third is, it is generally assumed that X is something suggested wherever this paper suggests it should be Y. So here what you're trying to do is that you will depart from the consensus on your topic and establishing a new position. Coming to the fourth head of this paper, which is the objective, where you specify that what you intend to find out. For an argumentative paper, you use this statement, whereas for empirical paper, you poses a research question. For in this position, you don't have to discuss in much in detail here, because that detail will be the full rest of the paper will be doing it with the help of your evidences and arguments, but you just have to minimally point it out why you're trying to do it here and what is the objective out of which you're trying to reach. And the important thing that this part should be written in past tense, not in the present tense. It should be in past tense. And then last is the overview, where you give a brief overview of the rest of the paper. Generally, the scientific format of writing a structured paper is that you discuss the introduction, methods, result, discussion format, but it's not always necessary. So if you are adopting some other topic, then you should, and which is not a predictable way, then you should describe the shade of it, and it should be concise, direct, and written in the present tense. That is, you have to make sure that this overview, it should be in present tense. So coming to the section of this introduction part, so the introduction can be divided into 4 paragraphs if you want to do. The first is a bigger problem, then it's narrow problem within it, and yet narrower paper gap, which can be further be subdivided into 3 intro paragraphs. The first is the field domain, the second is what field knows, and third is remaining gaps. And the fourth of the paragraph of the introduction section is summary, which can be subdivided into interparagraph on the terms of our approach and our result. So taking an example of argumentative introduction, where on the head of environmental impact of cattle farming. So if you can see here, I have put this paragraph into 5 color codes. So let me read it for you. The first line is talking about, are cows responsible for climate change? So this statement implies the question underlying this research study, which is the hook statement also, which I mentioned in my starting of my this introduction, that it can be a research question also, or if any question which you are trying to do. The second part, which is in green color, a recent study shows that the cattle farmers account for 2/3 of agricultural nitrogen emission in Netherlands. These emissions result from nitrogen in manure, which can degrade into ammonia and enter the atmosphere. The study calculation shows that agriculture is the main source of nitrogen pollution, accounting for 46% of the country's total emission. By comparison, road traffic and households are responsible for 6.1% each, whereas the industrial sector for 1%. So this is the background which you're trying to do, that what previous research have demonstrated by pointing out the statistical data. The third, which is the cyan color, while efforts are being made to mitigate these emissions, policymakers are reluctant to recount the scale of the problem. The approach presented here is a radical one, but commensurate with the issue. This paper argues that the Dutch government must stimulate the subsidized livestock farmers, especially the cattle farmers, to the transition of sustainable vegetable farming. So the last two, which I've discussed here, the cyan color states the state problem which the researcher intends to discuss here, whereas the pink color is trying to express the position that the rest of paper will present. And the last part is the overview, which is dedicated to the structure of your paper, that it first establishes the inadequacy of the current mitigation measures, then discusses the various advantages of the result proposed, and finally addresses the potential objection of the plan on economic grounds. Taking another example for an empirical paper, this is we're talking about the relationship of Instagram use with the body image issues and addressing in girls. So here, an example, I'm reading it for you. The rise of the social media has been accompanied by a sharp increase in prevalence of body image issues among the women and girls. This correlation has received significant academic attention. Various empirical studies have been conducted into the Facebook usage among adolescent girls. These studies have consistently found that the visual and interactive aspects of the platform have the greatest influence on the body image issues. Despite this, highly visual social media, such as Instagram, have yet to be robustly researched. This paper sets out to address this research gap. We investigated the effect of daily Instagram use and the prevalence of body image issues among the adolescent girls. It was hypothesized that the daily Instagram use would be associated with an increase in body image concerns and decrease in self-esteem ratings. So the first yellow color is the hook statement, which implies a strong statement underlying this research study. The second is the previous research, which explains the previous research has demonstrated. The third is the color, which states a problem which researchers intends to discuss, whereas the pink color is the express position that the rest paper will be discussing with the research question and hypothesis. Coming to the next section, which is the methodology section. So it is basically a systematic method to resolve a research problem through a data gathering and using various techniques, providing an interpretation of data gathered, drawing a conclusion about the research data. So basically, it is a blueprint of our research which discusses and explains the data collection and analysis method and explains what you did, how you did, and why you are doing it by evaluating the reliability and validity of your research. So it should include the type of research you are trying to conduct, how you have collected and analyzed the data, any tool or materials you have used in the research, why did you choose those methods, and it should be written in a past tense. Another thing which I felt there was a lot of confusion when I was writing down my papers, that there's a confusion what is a method and what is a methodology. So let me just clarify that before we get into detail how to write a methodology section. The method is something which is gathering evidence, whereas a methodology is something which is underlying the theory and analysis of how the research does and should proceed, and also a set of principles and ideas that inform the research of design, while methods are practical procedure used to generate and analyze the data. So how should we write a research methodology? It should it is a place which shows that how much rigorously you have conducted your research and which can be replicated, where the readers can use it to refer it. So the first step is to explain your methodological approach, where you explain what your research problem or question did you aim to investigate, aim to describe the characteristics of something, or you are exploring under research topic, or you can also establish a causal relationship here. Also, you need to describe that what type did you need to achieve this aim, like it's a qualitative data or quantitative data, or it's a mixed type of data, mixed methods approach are you taking. Then what is the primary data or a secondary data, or have you collected by observation or experiment or a survey, and why did you choose these methods? Is it a standard methodological approach in your field, or it just requires a justification, or is just the best way to answer your research question, where there are any ethical consideration also involved in your choices, and what are the criteria and validity and reliability in this type of research. Coming to steps 2, which is a collection of data. So if it's a quantitative methods you are approaching for, then one of the example of quantitative is that you take a survey. You need to describe in everything that where, when, and how it was conducted. So will you explain here how did you design the questionnaire for a survey? What form of your questions was it a multiple choice, or it was a Likert scale, or were your surveys conducted in person or virtually, or what was the sample methods to select your participants? That's an important thing. Or what is your sample size or your response rate? Even if you're taking an experiment, then you have to explain what are the tools or the techniques or the process that you use to conduct the experiment. Again, if it's an experiment, then you need to explain how did you design it, what was the recruitment process for the participants, what were the tools that you used, or it can also be an existing data also. So if it's an existing data, then you need to explain what was the source of that material, how was it originally produced, and what was the criteria to select that material. If it's a qualitative method, then it is a little more flexible and subjective. You need to discuss the criteria that you use to select your data and the context in which you conducted it, and what role did you play in that for a collective, whether you were an active participant or you were a passive observer. So it can be done on the two bases, interviews or focus group, where you also need again explain where, when, and how. That how did you find that participant? How many participants did the part? Or what form of the interviews did you take? What is it was a structured or a semi-structured or unstructured uh, interview session? how long did you took the interview, and how were they recorded. If it's an observation, then what group or community did you observe? How long did you spend there? How did you gain access to this group? What role did you play in the community? How did you spend time in conducting the resource, and where was it located? And also, how did you record your data? And if it's a mixed method approach, then you're talking about the quantitative and qualitative, where single standalone these methods cannot fit, then the mixed method is a good fit for it. Coming to the third step, which is analysis. Here you know how you have proceeded and analyze the data. In this methodological section, you should avoid going into the detail that how much you have. You should not start introducing or discussing any of the results here. Rather, if it's in a quantitative method, you should explain how did you prepare the data before analyzing it, like checking on the missing data or removing any outliers or transforming the variables here. Which software did you use, like Photoshop did you use, or Adobe SPSS, stats, or R did you use, or which statistical test did you use, two-tailed test, simple linear regression, which type of test did you use here? If it's a qualitative method, then you need to, which is usually based on language, images, or observations. So it can be done in a three analysis way. If it's it can be content analysis, which discusses and categorizes the meaning of the words, phrases, and sentences. The second is thematic analysis, where you do a coding and closely examine the data to identify the themes and patterns out of it. Or if it is a discourse analysis, where you're studying communication and meaning in relation to the social context. Step 4, which is your choices, that you are justifying the medical choices of you have made. You should clearly make the case for why you choose the method you did it. This is especially true if you did not make a standard approach for your topic. So in that case, you need to explain why other method was not suitable for your objective and how this method which you are going to take it should contribute to the new knowledge or understanding. But the new method which you're choosing, it should be valid and reliable. And while leaving the analysis or the meaning of the importance and relevance to your result for your discussion section. So just quickly brush up again. So methodology can have three types: quantitative, qualitative, and mixed use, done by survey, experiments, interviews, observations, and existing data. So if you take an example of the qualitative methods sample, if you read here, it has been divided into 6 color codes. The first reading it for you, that the survey consisting of 5 multiple choice questions and 10 questions measured on 7-point Likert scale. The goal was to collect the survey responses from 350 customers visiting the fitness apparel company, Brick and Mortar, located in Boston on July 4th to 8th, 2022, between 11 to 15. Here, a customer was defined as a person who had purchased a product from a company on the day they took the survey. So the first 3 are describing what form did the question take, describing when, where, and how survey was done, and then what was the sampling method did you use to select the participants. Later half of the paragraph discusses that the participants were given 5 minutes to fill in the survey anonymously. In total, 408 customers responded, but not all the surveys were fully completed. Due to this, 21 surveys results included in the analysis. Before analysis, the data gathered was prepared. The data set checked for missing the data and outliers. For this, the outlier labeling was used. All the values outside the calculator range were considered outliers. The data was then analyzed using the two-way ANOVA with the statistical software SPSS. So here the later half discusses what was the sample size and the response rate, how you prepare the data before analyzing it, and which software and statistical test was used. Taking an example of a qualitative method, in order to reach the better insights into the possibility for future improvement of fitness store product range, semi-structured interviews were conducted with 8 returning customers. Here, returning customers were defined as someone who usually bought products at least twice a week from the store, and surveys were used to select the participants. Here, the first to discuss why did you choose this methods of the study and how did you find and select the participants. The interviews were conducted in a small office next to cash register and lastly lasted approximately 20 minutes each. The answers were recorded by the note taking and 7 interviews were also filmed with the consent. One interview preferred not to be filmed. The interview was transcribed then and thematic analysis was conducted. This involved coding at all the data before identifying and reviewing 6 key themes. Each theme was examined to gain an understanding of participants' perception and motivation. So the later three discusses at how long were the interviews, how were they recorded, and how the analysis was done by coding and closely examining the data. Coming to the next section, which is the results section, which represents the core finding of your paper, which is applied to gather and analyze information. It is a logical sequence without bias, interpretation from the author, and setting up the reader for the later interpretations and evaluations in the discussion section. It is the purpose of the section is generally to break down the data into sentences, and it is in most of the journals it is given together, but it depends on the journal type that you are publishing. In some journals it is together, some it's separate. But what we mostly do in the section is that we describe what did you find in your research. So if you go into divide into different heads, so it is first is the introductory content where you understanding the result by restating the research problem that underpins the purpose of your study. Then you explain the summary of your key findings arranged in a logical sequence that generally follows the methodological section. In this section also, you can introduce your figures, maps, charts, photos, tables to illustrate your findings as appropriate, find it. And lastly, you give a systematic description of your result that and highlight for the reader observation that are most relevant to your topic. This section is also written in your past tense. So if we divide this into three sentences, paragraph, interparagraph, it is method summary, which is subdivided into as question, journal methods, answer sort. It is second paragraph talking about the logic 1, which is the raw data, logic 2 is processed, and logic 3 final statistics, which is subdivided into we need to show, this is how we show, and we thus show, which is supported by figures and logic steps. But when we are writing it, we should avoid doing the following things like discussing or interpreting a result here, which is for the discussion section. If you want to do something here, you can just compare or contrast specific results which you find in reading a literature review. Like similar to Smith in 1990s, one of the findings of this study is the strong relation between the motivation and academic achievements. Something like that you can do here. You should not be reporting the background information here or attempt explaining your findings. You should not ignore the negative result. If somehow you have found any negative result which did not support your hypothesis or research questions, you should document them, but you should state them in the discussion section. And that have emerged. You should not include any raw data here or intermediate calculations. If it's to be given, then it should be in an appendix or set of appendices. It should be just factual and concise. And we should not use the phrases like appear to be greater or lesser than or demonstrates promising trends that. And also, if you need to highlight something, then you highlight in the discussion section. The tables and figures which you are doing it to support the logical steps, it should be not be confusing and should be properly labeled. So if you take an example of a reporting survey result, a two-sample t-test was used to test the hypothesis that higher social distance from the environmental problems could reduce the intent to donate the environmental organization with donation intentions. As the outcome, variable and social distance. as a predictor variable. The social distance was found to be positively correlated with the donation intentions, with the donation intention of high social distance group of 0.28 higher on average than the low social distance. This contradicts the initial hypothesis that the social distance would decrease donation intention and in fact suggests a small effect in opposite direction. The first is talking about the introduction context. The second is talking about what were the findings, and the third is description of the result. Coming to the next section is the discussion, where it's to interpret and describe the significance of your findings. What have you already known? Investigate and explain the new findings and fresh insights. The discussion will also should connect it to your introduction section by the way of your research question or hypothesis that you have posed and the literature you reviewed, but it should not be repeated and rearranging your introduction here. And also you should keep in mind when you're writing a discussion section that your study should have moved the reader's understanding of the research problem forward from where you left it into the introduction section. It is also should be critically thinking or give a critical thinking about an issue, should develop a creative solution and more profound understanding of the research problem that you are studying. It should give also present the importance of the study and contribute to filling up the existing gaps. It should write in the sections like interpretation, what do the result mean, why do the result matter, what was the can the result tell us, and what practical action the scientific study should follow. So if we can list it down under the heads, the first heading we should explain as a summary that you should not just repeat, as I said, the data that we already reported, but it should be a clear statement of the overall result and direct answer to your research questions here. For example, the result indicated that, or the study demonstrates a correlation between, or this analysis supports a theory that, or the data suggests that. The second is the interpretation, which is the meaning of the result might seem obvious to you, but is important to spell out their significance for the readers and show exactly how they answer your research questions, like identifying the correlation patterns or relationship among the data. Or you're discussing whether the result met expectations or supported a hypothesis, or conceptualizing your finding with the previous research and theory, or you are explaining the unexpected result and evaluating their significance. You can also be considering the possible alternative explanations and making an argument for your position. So this is generally room around your key themes, the hypothesis and research questions. In line, like you can also take an example, like in line with hypothesis or contrary to hypothesis, or the result contradicted the claim of somebody researcher that, or the results might suggest X, but however, based on your finding, you find some similar studies, a possible explanation is Y. Then is your third is the implication that should result back to the work that you have done during a literature review and discuss how your finding fits to the existing knowledge and what are the new insights that you have contributed, or what is the constitution that you have for the theory and practice. And also it is important here that you should ask yourself these questions like, do your results agree with the previous research? If so, what do they add to? Are you finding very different from other studies? If so, what might it be? Or do the results support or challenge existing theories? Are there any practical implications? For example, these results built on existing evidence of, or the results do not fit the theory with, or the experiment provides a new insight into the relationship between, or the result should be taken into account when considering how to. The data contributes a clearer understanding of something, or while the previous research focused on X, while the result demonstrate Y. Also, it is important that you should acknowledge the limitations. And it should demonstrate the credibility and listing out it is not about that you should listing out your errors here, but providing out accurate picture of what can or what cannot be concluded from your study. These limitations can be because of your research design or methodological approach or unanticipated obstacles. So this is directly relevant, but this limitations should be directly relevant to your objectives and evaluate how much impact they had on achieving the aims of your research. And lastly, the recommendations, which are generally also given in the conclusion, but if you want, you can code here in the discussion also. But you should not just write that that more studies should be done, but you should give the concrete idea that how the future works can be built on, like the future research need to establish this, or the future studies should take into account this. But what you should not do here in the discussion, that you should not introduce any new result that you have not discussed in your results chapter, or you should not make any implemented claims that you should avoid any interpretation or speculation that do not support it from your data, or do not undermine your research if you have found any negative results. Because of the limitation, you should be strengthening your credibility, not emphasizing your weakness or failure. So if we can divide discussion into paragraph, inter-paragraph, so it is can be divided into 5 heads: paragraph, the result and conclusion, where we explain it into we found, we fill the gap. Limitation in filling gaps and limitation in generalization. Can we break through our limitations, details, and how we fixed it and interpreted it? And the contribution beyond and science is better now can be divided into our strength, what is useful for, and the difference made. So coming to the conclusion,
Um, Manika ma'am, your voice is not audible.
I'm audible now. Hello, am I audible now?
Yes, yes, you are. Yes.
Thank you. Uh, so, uh, so first step is here you restate the problem, where you remind the reader of your research problem that you will have discussed, but you have to zoom out back and give the details of the bigger picture. That while restating your research problem here, you should, which you have already introduced in the introduction section. So you should not avoid, you should avoid rephrasing it just identically and appearing it again in the introduction. It should not be like you have repeated the same thing which you're talking in introduction section, but it should be giving out a bigger picture out of it, and it should be moved from specific to back to the general. It should be concise but and to the point. And one thing which I also like to say, do not start your conclusion with in conclusion to conclude with. It is too obvious for a person that you are concluding because you're giving the heading a conclusion. It's and also it seems little, to not say, but it seems little unsophisticated that you are writing these words. And also this negative results gives you an opportunity here to give demand for a future result that can be based on this information. So that's all for this. And then coming to the example of a conclusion here, that while the role of the cattle in the climate change is by now common knowledge, countries like Netherlands continually fails to confront this issue with the urgency it deserves. The evidence is clear: to recreate a truly future-proof agriculture sector, the Dutch farmers must be incentivized to the transition from the livestock farming to sustainable vegetable farming, as well as dramatically lowering the emissions. Plant-based agriculture, if approached in the right way, can produce food with less land, providing opportunity for the nature regeneration areas that will themselves contribute to the climate targets. Although this approach would have economic ramifications from a long-term perspective, it would represent a significant step towards a more suitable and resilient national economy. The transitioning to the sustainable vegetable farming will make the Netherlands cleaner and healthier, setting an example for another European government. Farmers, policymakers, and consumers must focus on the future, not just on their own short-term interests, and work for the implement their transition now. So these are stating the research problem statements and recommendations, calls for actions. Whereas for an empirical paper, as social media becomes increasingly central to the young people's everyday lives, it is important to understand how different platforms affect their developing self-conceptions. By testing the effect of the daily Instagram use among teenage girls, this study established that highly visual social media does indeed have significant effect on body image concerns, with a strong correlation between the amount of time spent on the platform and participants' self-reported dissatisfaction with their appearance. However, the strength of this effect was moderated by the pre-test self-esteem rating. The participants with higher self-esteem were less likely to experience an increase in body image concerns after they used Instagram. This suggests that while Instagram does not impact image, it is also important to consider the wider social physiological context in which the usage occurs. The teenagers who are already predisposed to self-esteem usage may be at greater risk of experiencing negative effects. The future research into Instagram and other high visual social media should focus on establishing a clear picture on how self-esteem and related constructs influence young people experience of these platforms. Furthermore, while this experiment measured Instagram usage in terms of time spent on the platform, observational studies are required to gain more insights into different patterns of usage to investigate the instance whether active posting is associated with different effects than passive consumption of social media. So this paragraph explains the different parts that the first is a research problem, then explain what are the findings, how there was a disconnect and impact of it, and the recommendation and call for actions. Coming to the next section of referencing of Mendeley. Through that, yeah. So it is a free reference manager which helps to organize, collaborate, and discover. So if I for the right hand side, you can see this is an image. If you go Google for a Mendeley, you open this website, you will find these four tabs: Mendeley Reference Manager, Mendeley Site, Mendeley Desktop, and Web Importer. So Mendeley Desktop is not available after from September. So I will suggest if you're using download the Mendeley Reference Manager now. Mendeley site is used for the Word application and Web Importer is used for the web page. Coming to that, it uses the Elsevier account, which is a free account which you can sign in. If your institution have an Elsevier account, you can use that email ID. If not, then you can sign in with your account also, personal accounts. So once you have downloaded it, this is how it appears on your page, an application which shows all references recently added, recently read, favorites, my publication, trash, collection, the groups, and add new. So let's understand how can we add a paper here. So when you go to the add new, it gives you the options of files from the computer, add, enter manually, and import your library. So files from the computer, you can directly drag and put here, or you can just pick it and you can upload the file. You can enter it manually also. For manually, if you go there, you will see there are a reference tag. You can select here, title, authors, and you can enter here. Identified as something, for every paper, there is a DOI number. You can put that, you can search, and you can add that entry here. Then coming, if you're using a web page, it is visible for all the browsers. It can be for Mozilla, it can be Chrome, it can be Safari, it can be Microsoft Edge, whatever browser is available for all. Once you downloaded it, you can see this red icon comes on your bar where it shows that the Mendeley is inserted in your browser. So whatever paper you're searching, you can search here. Once a paper is searched, you can log into that Mendeley and you can select here and then you can add to the Mendeley. Once a paper is added to the Mendeley, it shows in your folders, which has info section, annotation sections, and notebook. So if you go to your info section, below that there is a tag section here where you can give the comments. This is a paper which talks about the diseases, so they have given us options for that. But whatever the paper is talking about, you can just write in one word so that it gives you easy to search. You can search from here or you can filter down your papers as per these tags you have given here. Again, then once you're doing that, it is also giving an option to take folders here by going to the introduction. So if you find the paper interesting on for an introduction chapter, you can make a introduction methodology, you can make a methodology, you can even make a folders as per your keywords, and you can do that. Then this green symbol here, which shows that this paper is not yet read. And this star is if you click here, it goes into the favorites section. It turns into yellow, and then you can drag it and put it here. So even for the introduction to whichever paper you want, you can go to the introduction, drag it, and you can put it up here. Then comes the group section. Suppose you want to share certain papers and you want your guide or somebody else to read the papers. What you can do is you can give an access to that. You can make a group here, and which you can show that it is Channel Club. You can organize it as per you want. Once you do that, you can go to the manage the group. Once you go to the manage the group, it asks you to send an invite by writing an email ID, and you can send the invite to that person. Coming back to this annotation in notebook, so every paper it gives an option to write a notebook. Whatever notes you want, you can write for that paper. It's just a sorting out, because when if you're doing a research or you're doing a PhD, it gives you a lot of scope of straightening and pruning down the papers and finding it, because you read a lot of papers over the 4 or 5 years. Then you can write down notes whatever you want. Then in annotation, it gives you the flexibility. You can also write a general note about it in the paper, which under which if you open the paper, you can even highlight the different colors and you can change the color. For example, you can use yellow color. That's what I have done for yellow colors for any literature review, blue color for any statistical data or something like that, which you can use as per that. Even you can do a rectangular highlight. You can even delete if you want to. Even you can insert the comments, and that comments will automatically be reflected in your annotation sections of your paper. Coming to the Mendeley site in which you can do it for the word. So once you download the word Mendeley site, it's the reference section. It gives you the Mendeley site option here, where if you want to insert any sentence or reference, you can put a cursor here, and whichever paper you want, you can search from here. You can click here, and then you can put insert citation. Even you can go to the more, and you can insert the library bibliography wherever you want. You can even change the citation style, whichever citation style you want, you can do that. Coming to the other part of the section is the journal selection. The journal selection should be done on the basis of what kind of audience it is, what is the prestige of the journal, or what type of access does it have, what is the impact factor, how much time will it take for publishing, what is the quality of the journal, what is the acceptance rate, how much time it takes for acceptance. It should be, when you're deciding for the journal, it should be decided before you draft the paper, so that you can look for the similar research work, you can consider that journal that has published your work, and that you can decide. You can look for the references that those papers have referred to. The rejection of done as a manuscript because of the find is outside the scope of the journal. Formatting is not as per the guidelines. If you have not given a good adequate response to the comments by the reviewers, the language of the paper, and resubmission is done without the revision. What a reviewer look like when you're writing a research paper? It should be a clear, which is of features of good manuscript, useful. It should have a logical flow. It should be original. It should have an approach. Have a interpretation is done in a better way. Writing style and should follow the ethics. Whereas coming to the last section of my presentation, that it should be responding to the reviews, respond thoughtfully and courteously, answer all to the points thoroughly, and if you disagree also to some point, you should incorporate about explaining why in polite and detailed manner that you disagree to that point. Revise and resubmit it promptly. Just a quick before a thank you, I just quickly want to show hands-on about the Mendeley. So this is my Mendeley account of doing that. So as I showed, this is the folders I have done on the basis of my keywords also and the findings which I want to do. So this is how a paper are done. So this is the papers. This paper is shown that I have not read, and if I want to start, it turns out to that, and automatically it is synchronized to your account. So this is an offline also that you can use this papers offline. So if I go to this favorites, this paper has turned up in my favorites account. Now, if I want to read a paper, this is giving the info about the paper. This is the tag which I was talking about. You can write any tag and you can put here. Annotation, whichever notes which you want to do, you can put here. Whatever notebook notes you want to do, you can do. So if you want going to the any paper, suppose I want to highlight this with using a rectangle, I have done this. And now if I want to change this to the highlighting text, so I am doing this and I'm highlighting it with the text. Now, if I want to give a comment, I am writing a comment, something it is interesting, and I entered here. So it automatically has entered into my annotation section. Now, if I am going to give a glimpse of how you put an information in the citation. So this is one of my manuscript. So if I want to give write any paper, suppose I want to quote of any book. I am just writing one of the book I want to do. So if I go to all my references, if I write here, immediately say suppose I'm writing quoting of this, so I put here automatically this my citation has been done. So your manual work of writing the citation it decreases. And now suppose I want to change the citation style to American, I directly go there and I change it from here. So see, my all my annotations have been changed. Now suppose I want to insert my bibliography. So I suppose I have to do here. I go to the more column, stop taking an update. Yeah. So to more and you insert the column, all the papers which you have referred in this paper will come here. So with this, I would like to end my presentation. Thank you so much.